Stories, Philippines, podcast.
Warning, this broadcast delved into the harrowing realms of spiritual conflict and dark history. Listener caution is strongly suggested as the themes explored may unsettle sensitive ears. What does it take to stare into the face of true malice and not flinch? Is it faith? Is it a desperate sort of courage born of having nothing left to lose? Imagine a sound that is not a sound at all, but a physical pressure, a suffocating weight of pure, malicious intent settling over your soul. Think of a whisper that speaks secrets not of this world, promises the taste of ash and sulfur echoing in the quiet chambers of your mind. We tell ourselves that in the modern world, the horrors of the spirit are merely relics of a superstitious past, a nervous shudder in the face of the unknown. But what if those terrors are not only real, but are actively looking for a door, a single crack in the fortress of your sanity to step through? Tonight, we open the archive on a battle that has raged for millennia, a silent war where the casualties are not just bodies, but immortal souls. I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines podcast. The year was 1973. Across the oceans, in the quiet suburbs of Georgetown in Washington, D.C., a narrative was unfolding that would seize the global imagination and cement a particular image of spiritual warfare into the cultural bedrock. William Peter Blatty's novel and the subsequent cinematic masterpiece, The Exorcist, did more than just frighten audiences. It dragged the ancient solemn ritual of the Catholic Church's exorcism out of the shadowed chambers of monasteries and into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. The film's success was not just a testament to its masterful filmmaking or its shocking special effects, but to a primal, terrifying resonance it struck deep within the human psyche. The possibility of demonic possession and the Church's formalized, brutal response to it. But the story of spiritual bondage and the struggle for liberation is hardly an American invention or a modern Hollywood script. It is a terrifying thread woven through the entire tapestry of human civilization, and it holds a particularly dark, complex color in the Catholic Philippines, a nation where the spiritual realm is not a distant, abstract concept, but a vibrant, often frightening daily reality. The historical context of exorcism is a dark, winding road that stretches back to the dawn of organized religion. Every major faith tradition, from Judaism and early Christianity to Islam and various forms of animism, contains a framework for dealing with malevolent spiritual entities that take up residence in the living. In the early Catholic Church, the rite was far less formalized than the one depicted in the film. It was often a simple prayer of command, drawing on the New Testament accounts where Jesus himself casts out demons with a word. However, as the Church consolidated its power and battled competing spiritual beliefs and heresies throughout the Middle Ages, the ritual began to accrue layers of complexity, theology, and terrifying legalism. The darkest period for this practice was arguably the centuries following the Reformation and the subsequent Catholic Counter-Reformation. This was an era obsessed with spiritual purity, where the lines between mental illness, witchcraft, and genuine demonic possession became lethally blurred. The 1984 historical account, The Devils of Loudun, detailing the mass hysteria and accusations of demonic possession in a French convent in the 1600s, showcases the terrifying power of this belief to corrupt and destroy. Priests like Urbain Grandier, though likely innocent, were accused of colluding with the devil and were subsequently tortured and burned at the stake. The exorcism became a tool of religious and political control, a brutal theater performed to reinforce the church's authority over both the body and the soul. This dark history of violence and misdiagnosis is the heavy, unseen backdrop to every exorcism performed today, a silent warning of the immense power the ritual wields. Now, let us bring this darkness closer to home. In the Philippines, the colonial imposition of Catholicism overlaid, but never entirely erased, a rich, deeply ingrained tapestry of indigenous spiritual beliefs. This is where the Western concept of the demon meets the local folklore of the maligno. The term maligno is an all-encompassing one, referring to malevolent spirits, often nature-bound, or the souls of the unquiet dead, like the capricious duwende or the terrifying aswang. In a traditional Filipino context, a person suffering from an affliction of the spirit might be taken not to a priest for a formal exorcism, but to an albularyo, a folk healer. This practitioner, operating outside the official church doctrine, uses a blend of herbal medicine, prayer, and ritual to diagnose and treat the spiritual malaise. Their method often focuses on appeasing the offended spirit or luring the entity out, a more nuanced and less confrontational approach than the direct command and expulsion of a formal Catholic rite. However, with a deeply entrenched Catholic faith that blankets the archipelago, the formal rite of exorcism has a significant presence. The belief in Satan as a powerful, cunning adversary is a core tenet of the faith, and stories of true, unyielding possession occasionally emerge from the shadows of quiet provincial towns. The distinction between a mischievous maligno and a full-fledged demonic entity becomes crucial. The maligno might cause misfortune, sickness, or localized haunting. The demon, as understood by the church, seeks total spiritual annihilation, a complete takeover of the will and the soul. It is a distinction that carries the weight of a person's eternity. Consider the case of a young woman we will call Celestine. Celestine grew up in a tightly knit community in the Visayas during the 1980s. She was, by all accounts, a quiet, studious girl, the kind of daughter who brought honor to her family. Her troubles began subtly, a slow, creeping dread that began to cloud her once sunny disposition. She would report seeing a fleeting, tall shadow at the edge of her vision, a scent of something rotten and coppery that no amount of cleaning could eradicate. The physical signs were next: unexplained bruises, a sudden, frightening fluency in a language her family swore she had never learned, and a profound, visceral hatred for sacred objects. A crucifix that had hung in her room since childhood was found snapped in two, the metal twisted as if by powerful, invisible hands. Her family first sought the help of an albularyo, a respected elder named Manong Emilio. Manong Emilio performed his rituals, his bulong or whisper prayers mixed with smoke from dried leaves, trying to coax the offended spirit to leave. But the entity within Celestine did not respond with the usual complaints or demands of a local maligno. Instead, it would laugh, a deep, guttural, masculine sound issuing from Celestine's slight frame, a sound that mocked Manong Emilio's power and his faith. It spoke of ancient hierarchies, of an unholy power that Manong Emilio could not begin to comprehend. After weeks of escalating torment, the family, utterly broken and terrified, turned to the Catholic Church. They found a priest, a man known for his quiet piety and his reluctance to embrace sensationalism, Father Virgilio. Father Virgilio had spent years discerning the true nature of spiritual affliction, wary of confusing possession with psychological or physiological disorders. This is a critical point where the psychological and the theological converge. Modern science, of course, offers powerful, often compelling, alternative explanations for the phenomena associated with possession. Psychiatrists and neurologists point to conditions like dissociative identity disorder, certain forms of epilepsy, or even complex forms of schizophrenia, which can manifest with symptoms that mimic the contortions, voice changes, and aversion to religious symbols that are the hallmark of possession. The dark laughter, the sudden knowledge, the terrifying strength, these, in a clinical setting, might be understood as psychological breaks, the mind fracturing under unimaginable stress or trauma. In the sheer theatricality of the events, the performance for an audience is often a central consideration. Yet, for those who believe, the scientific explanation often leaves an unsettling void. How does science explain a person with no medical history of such strength suddenly requiring 4 grown men to hold them down? How does it account for the phenomena known as stigmata, the sudden appearance of wounds corresponding to the crucifixion, or the knowledge of secret sins of the exorcist, a phenomenon that has been documented in various possession cases globally? These are the moments that drag the careful, rational mind to the edge of the abyss, forcing a terrifying consideration of a reality beyond the material. If this story has resonated with you, if the shadows of the unseen world have ever touched your life, consider sharing your experience. We are always looking for authentic stories from the archipelago. Submit your stories to our email, storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. We honor your anonymity and your courage. Father Virgilio, a man steeped in the theological tradition, began the process with the rigorous protocol required by the Church, a protocol that mirrors the strict requirements seen in the 1973 film, which was itself based on a 1949 case in St. Louis. First, the medical and psychological checks to rule out all natural causes. Only after extensive consultation with doctors who could find no physical or mental explanation for Celestine's condition did the bishop grant permission for the solemn rite. The location was a small, secluded room in a convent, far from the prying eyes of the community. The act of exorcism is a brutal, exhausting, and intimate warfare. It is not a quick fix. For Celestine, it lasted for weeks. A cycle of prayer, invocation, and the demon's hateful, mocking response. Father Virgilio would begin the Latin prayers, the ancient words a shield and a sword. The demon speaking through Celestine would snarl and hiss. The description of the entity's voice was perhaps the most unsettling detail. A multi-layered sound, at once a whisper and a scream. A chorus of voices that seemed to stretch and distort the air in the room. It knew secrets, not just Celestine's, but the deepest, most carefully guarded sins and failings of the attending priest. It was psychological warfare designed to break the faith and the resolve of the exorcist. This is where the international parallel is striking. In countless cultures, the demon's primary weapon is not fire or brimstone, but knowledge and doubt. The Jewish tradition of the Dibuk, a malevolent possessing spirit, is often fought with a focus on uncovering the spirit's purpose or identity, which then gives the exorcist control. The Catholic rite is a direct command in the name of God, but the spiritual battle often devolves into a desperate intellectual sparring match with an entity of ancient, terrifying cunning. The geographic details of the setting played a silent, significant role. The convent was close to the sea, and in the quiet of the night, the rhythmic crash of the waves provided a haunting counterpoint to the screams and prayers inside the room. In Filipino folklore, the sea is a place of powerful spirits, a vast, unknowable realm that holds its own ancient power. The constant presence of the ocean, a reminder of the wild, untamed nature of the world outside the church's walls, added to the atmospheric dread of the setting. For a deeper look into the historical records of the church's approach to these dark subjects and the specific prayers and processes involved in a formal exorcism, you can find detailed show notes and support options in the description of this episode. Your support helps us uncover these difficult and often forgotten histories. The true climax of Celestine's ordeal, and the moment Father Virgilio later recounted with a shudder, came after a particularly grueling 12-hour session. The demon, seemingly tired of its torment, offered a bargain. It would leave Celestine immediately, but it demanded to know which of the 2 attending priests had the weaker soul. It was a classic gambit, a direct challenge to the integrity of the exorcist, forcing them to turn on each other. Father Virgilio, through sheer spiritual exhaustion, simply responded with the words of the rite, refusing to acknowledge the demon's question. The sound that followed was not a scream, but a terrifying, deafening shriek of frustration, a sound Celestine described later as the sound of a great beast being suddenly, brutally caged. With a final, violent spasm, Celestine slumped into the arms of a nun, unconscious, but the demonic presence was gone. The aftermath of such a conflict is never simple. Celestine's recovery was a long, fragile journey back to her normal self. The memory of the time was fragmented, terrifying, a patchwork of pain and unholy words. she was left with a profound, quiet understanding of the spiritual war that rages beneath the surface of everyday life. The experience fundamentally altered her worldview, transforming her from a casual believer into someone who had faced the true terror of the divine adversary and survived. If you appreciate the in-depth research and the complex narratives we explore on Stories Philippines, please consider supporting our work. You can access exclusive content, bonus episodes, and behind-the-scenes insights by finding us on Patreon. Your contribution helps keep this project independent and ad-free. The enduring question that remains is not whether the events of the exorcism were real. For Celestine and Father Virgilio, they were profoundly, terrifyingly real. But what they tell us about the human condition. Why does this narrative of possession and expulsion resonate so powerfully across cultures and centuries? Is it the fear of losing control? The terror of our own minds turning against us? Isn't it the ultimate theological horror, the idea that the soul is not inviolable but can be invaded and corrupted by a power that is both ancient and absolute? The story of The Exorcist and the true dark histories it mirrors serves as a chilling reminder that perhaps the greatest power of evil is not its spectacular malice, but its ability to make us doubt its very existence. We are all searching for answers in the dark, wondering where the line between the mind and the spirit truly lies. For those of you who want to continue the journey into the strange and wonderful world of Philippine beliefs, follow us on social media for daily folklore facts and updates. You never know what terrifying tale might be lurking in your feed. Did Celestine's ordeal represent a true victory over a supernatural entity, or a profound, terrifying psychological break that was only healed by the intense focus and ritual of a powerful belief system? It is a question that will linger in the quiet hours of the night, long after the sound of my voice has faded. Thank you for listening. If you were captivated by this episode, please subscribe, follow, and share this podcast with someone who appreciates a good dark story. Find ways to support the podcast financially in the show notes below. Join us again next time as we dig into another dark corner of Philippine history and folklore. Until then, be careful what you invite into your mind. Merry Christmas, everyone! Enjoy the holidays! This is Paul, and this has been Stories Philippines Podcast.